Books are a big part of the inspiration that I get when I work. And this might sound like this is not work, reading books, but trust me, reading books for an investor, it's like doing basic research for a scientist. You cannot underestimate how important that is. Today I'm going to talk about two books that I recently read. One actually I'm not yet finished, but I still want to talk about it. And the other one I'm finished, so I want to talk about that. Before that, though, the usual update. This is the Not Even Wrong podcast. It's October 1st, 2020. Since the last update on September 29th, we're up 18%. For the year, we're up 216%. The market is up around 4%. We're outperforming by 212%. Also, yesterday, we closed the third quarter. We were up 204% for the third quarter. So year to date for the third quarter, 204%. The market is up about 4%. So we outperformed by 200% in the first three quarters. And in the third quarter alone, we made 125% versus the market up 8%. The main performance was driven by Tesla and the CRISPR index. Tesla by far our largest position, therefore also the main contributor. Just before I go into the book review, I want to just mention briefly that we expect the Tesla delivery numbers tomorrow. Our expectations are in the 140,000 range. I think the market expects something like that. Anything above would be good, below probably not so good. These numbers are not the absolute, live or die type of situation for Tesla because as we expect, and many in the market, Tesla is a growth story, and one quarter can be a little bit up or down. But overall, we still believe that these milestones are important to continue showing strong demand, which is, I think, the most important part of the Tesla story right now when it comes to short term. We just need demand to be strong. We need the validation of the products. We need that to work out. And then all the other things can fall into place. So this number, I think, is going to be key for the near-term stock performance and also for our own confidence in the stock. If they can do 140,000 in production and delivery, that would be a very, very good sign of confidence, particularly in this relatively challenging time economic-wise. Now let me talk about the two books that I want to discuss. The first book is Chip Wilson's Lululemon story. Chip Wilson is the founder of Lululemon. And it's a very nice memoir. It's a book about entrepreneurship, about risk, about, most importantly, about taking your ideas and go with them all the way. And by the way, this is the same exact theme that is going through the other book that I'm reading, which is Oliver Stone's memoir, which is very similar. It's a different topic, different playground. Oliver Stone is a filmmaker. Chip Wilson is an entrepreneur. But in the end, the theme is the same. Your uniqueness makes you happy. Your uniqueness is your only ticket to success. There is nothing else. No money, no connections, no inheritance, no nothing. It is only what you have in your head, in your ideas and your grit to actually go through it and deliver it. That is the fundamental thesis beyond anybody who creates something interesting in this world. And value is measured in many ways. Oliver Stone is one of the best filmmakers in the world. He made films like he wrote or made, I don't know which one. He's a screenwriter and a filmmaker and a director. He made Wall Street. He made Platoon. He made Midnight Express. He made movies like JFK and so on and so forth. There's a lot of interesting stuff that he did. But the one thing that he really has, which is amazing, it's this unbelievable force to drive his own ideas to the next level. And this is also the same case with Chip Wilson. I want to talk about Wilson now first, and then I'm going to jump over to Oliver Stone. So as I said, the key ingredient of Chip Wilson's book to me is really, it shows that the famous beginning line of Anna Karenina, all happy families are alike and all unhappy families have their unique problems. And then Peter Thiel in his book 0 to 1 switches this around and says all happy companies are not alike and all unhappy companies are alike. What he's trying to say is that every happy company is not alike because they have something very unique that makes them happy, i.e. that makes them monopolists in their markets. And all unhappy companies have one thing alike, which is they're basically interchangeable, they're commodities. And this is really what comes across in Chip Wilson's book and also in Oliver Stone's book. It is, if you want to be happy, you have only one pillar that your happiness can be based on, and that is your unique ability to think and then the grit to actually execute. Wilson explains in his book how he built the Lululemon culture. And before I go into that, the culture is one very important ingredient of the Lululemon story. But actually, much more importantly, is the willpower of Chip Wilson and his close collaborators to solve certain problems and build an innovation stack around clothing, which then became almost impenetrable. Even now, after he left, many years after he left, the company is still doing very well because that innovation stack is still holding up, and companies like Nike or Adidas have a hard time competing. And that takes three things. It takes the visionary and grit. It takes the visionary founder with grit and the ability to build a company based on iteration. We always come back to this point. Iteration is the mother of all disruption, because the only way you can in fact disrupt technologies, disrupt industries, is by iterating. Nobody wakes up in the morning and has a solution to build a monopolistic business. But if you can build an innovation stack around iteration, and if you can somehow lower the cost of that iteration to the point where it doesn't cost you a fortune to make mistakes, and you keep improving and improving, you can end up in a situation where you actually outperform everybody else and nobody else has the ability to catch up with you. As I discussed as the follow-up on my follow-on episodes about the Tesla Battery Day, in our view, this is the key ingredient of Tesla and why we think it's going to become a trillion-dollar company. It's because of this ability to iterate and create an innovation stack around the massive market, which is the transportation market. So back to Chip Wilson, I think it's a book I highly recommend for anybody who's interested in how entrepreneurs build large companies. It is not just a book about an entrepreneur coming up with an idea and building something. It is much more a book about creating large value. So it's along the lines of Tesla or Starbucks, Lululemon. There is Boston Beer is one. Then there is, of course, the big ones like Amazon and Microsoft. If you really want to become a large company and create billions and billions of dollars of value, you have to have that ability to execute your vision in an iterative way, in a sense, in a way that you can build that innovation stack which makes you impenetrable, because the only way you can actually create value is by creating the value and capturing it, and that can only happen if you don't have competition. And in the book, Chip Wilson explains that. He talks a lot about also conflicts with the board and mistakes by hiring management. I think one lesson that I learned from the book is that how dangerous it is to hire professional managers in a startup, and I therefore like to stay away from such companies. For example, Snowflake now is one of those companies where you have founders which have built a very interesting company, but then you have professional managers, with the typical resumes, like, they worked here and there and EMC and whatnot, and boring companies, and now they're supposed to run this super high-end startup. It just doesn't add up to me, and Chip Wilson shows from the inside how that can go wrong, how people can have different perspectives, short-term option maximization strategies and stuff like that. So very, very dangerous. I would say it's almost for us at Orange Capital Partners has become a no-go, that we don't want to invest in companies with professional management that have been where founders are sort of still part of the game, but they're not really. They're a bit more marginalized. It's very dangerous. Let's say that's just something as a side note on the book. Now let's get to Oliver Stone. I think in Stone's book, it's marvelous how he is a very unique person, very, very idiosyncratic. He goes as a young person, he doesn't want to go to Yale, he goes to Vietnam. He kind of almost wants to kill himself by volunteering. He does some of the worst jobs possible in the Vietnam War, survives that war, ends up in jail for some drug stuff that, he kind of was stupid to do, gets out, and then, gets into Hollywood. But it's kind of a story of a person with grit and vision and talent delivering enormous, enormous value. And one thing I really like about Stone is his ability to tell stories. Just to tell, let's say, Scarface, where he wrote the screenplay. Cuban immigrant comes to the United States. He becomes a thug, works for a big drug lord, starts sleeping with the mistress of the drug lord. Drug lord gets angry. Then Tony Montana, the protagonist, kills the drug lord. He becomes the big drug lord. In the end, he falls in love with his own sister, and the whole thing ends up in a dramatic shootout scene where everybody dies. Very short, not very spectacular, but then he fills it up with enormous spice, sex, violence, but in a way that you actually want to watch it, in a way that you really want to be part of that story. And this is, besides the points that I said, the uniqueness, the grit, the ability to execute, it's also just the spice. This person has just a certain spice. For example, I don't see that spice necessarily in Chip Wilson. I see that spice in Elon Musk, though, definitely. So sometimes people just have spice, and it helps them deliver enormous, enormous, strong value in different playgrounds. Like I said, movies, companies. It doesn't have to be always the calculating, logically perfect entrepreneur or anything like that. But I think that's the one thing that I personally noticed with Oliver Stone. It's the spice. The guy just has something, some sexy thing that just attracts me, and of course also attracts millions of people to his movies. I think one of the best scenes in the book is when he actually reads his own lines that he wrote for the Tony Montana character in Scarface. I think those scenes, like the dinner scene, where actually in his book Stone reads not all the lines, but a lot of the lines, it's just epic. I can't find words, but it's epic. The way he makes up a little bit of the Cuban accent of Tony Montana, and then he goes through the lines. You start appreciating the art and the value of this piece of work. So to summarize, the two books that I'm just, one almost finished, the other one I recently read, Chip Wilson, The Story of Lululemon, and Oliver Stone's memoirs, Searching the Light, In Search of the Light, I think that's the name. Because as a filmmaker, you always lack light, you always have problems with light, you have to shoot during the day, then there's sunset, and you run out of light. So there's a kind of a theme that goes through his life as a filmmaker. It's also kind of, light means money, because if you have money, you can shoot at night. If you don't have money, you can't. But that's besides the point. I think the key ingredient in both books is grit, innovation stack, vision, uniqueness, Peter Thiel's twist of the Anna Karenina starting line, that all happy companies are unique and all unhappy companies are alike. It comes across here. Unique people can build enormous value. It takes vision, grit, and the ability to execute on a large scale. And those are very rare ingredients that we as investors look for. And I think therefore these two books are incredibly valuable for our purposes. Thank you.